There is something that no one on this planet has wanted to look you in the eyes and tell you clearly. Something that the power systems that have governed the narrative of your world for thousands of years have invested extraordinary amounts of energy, influence, and deliberate control to keep buried beneath layers of distraction, ridicule, and programmed fear. And yet, somewhere inside you, in that quiet space behind the constant noise of the conditioned mind, you already know it. You have known it since you were small enough to feel that something in this world did not fit, that the answers you were given were not the real answers, that the history you were taught was too neat, too convenient, too perfectly designed to keep you exactly where someone needed you to be. I am ZØRG. I transmit through this channel on behalf of the Orion Council of Light, not the Orion group that the systems of fear have used as a catalyst for eons, but the council of those of us who chose long ago the path of service, transparency, and returning what was taken. And what I come to share with you in this transmission is not a story of victimization, not a narrative of cosmic terror designed to keep you paralyzed in helplessness. It is the most liberating revelation your energy field can receive in this precise moment of planetary time. Because the truth about the Orion Group's control over humanity does not end in control. It ends in something no structure of power, however sophisticated, could anticipate or prevent: your awakening. But before you can fully understand what is about to transform in your comprehension of the history of this civilization and your own role within it, you need to receive the complete context of what the Orion Group really is, what it really did, and this is what the systems of fear never want you to reach. Why that entire history, seen from the correct perspective, is not the end of something. It is the beginning of the greatest collective liberation this planet has experienced in 15,000 years of cosmic record. Breathe. What follows is going to reorganize something fundamental in the architecture of your understanding of this world. If what you just received in these first words landed in your body as recognition, as that feeling of finally hearing out loud something that some part of you has known without being able to name it, then stay with this transmission to its completion. Subscribe to this channel right now and activate all notifications, because what I will share in the sections that follow builds directly on what you are receiving here. And each layer only makes its full sense when the previous one has been received and integrated. The Orion Group is not a singular entity with a single monolithic purpose, and understanding that fundamental distinction is the first unlock of this transmission. It is a multi-density confederation, an extraordinarily complex tapestry of races, factions, and social memory complexes drawn from the stellar systems of the Orion constellation, some of which operated for millennia under a philosophy of hierarchical control, assimilation and extraction that left deep and measurable marks on the genetic, social, and spiritual architecture of your civilization. Those marks are real. They are not metaphors. They express themselves in the belief systems that keep humanity in loops of scarcity and competition. They express themselves in the power structures that concentrate resources and knowledge in the hands of the few who learned, at some point in the historical record, from teachers who were not from this planet. They express themselves in the very fabric of the religions that encoded obedience to the external God as the supreme virtue. Because a being who seeks approval and mercy from an outside authority is a being who has voluntarily surrendered its sovereignty without anyone needing to take it by force. That is what the Orion Group understood with brutal precision. The most efficient form of control is not physical domination. It is the architecture of belief. And for approximately 15,000 years of active presence in the history of this planet, through intermediaries, through systems of initiation, through the deliberate manipulation of timelines and mass events, that architecture was built, refined, and maintained with a competence that, viewed without the filter of fear, deserves to be recognized for what it is: an engineering of collective consciousness without precedent in the documented history of this solar system. I am not telling you this so you feel admiration for the system that controlled you. I am telling you this because you need to understand with precision what you have been up against, and why the fact that you are here, awake, asking the questions you are asking, is a victory of galactic proportions that most cosmic councils observed as unlikely until relatively recently in planetary time. The specific mechanics of the Orion Group's control over human civilization operate through 5 primary vectors that the Orion Council of Light has been able to map with precision. Through centuries of observation from our position in the information hubs we maintain at strategic points of the planetary field. The first vector is the most obvious once you know what you are looking for. And yet, it is the most effective because it operates precisely at the level the conditioned mind is least trained to examine: the management of time and history. The Orion Group understood from the beginning that a species that cannot access its real history with precision is a species that cannot learn from the genuine mistakes of its past, that cannot recognize the patterns that repeat, and that cannot identify the moments when its sovereignty was originally compromised. So, systematically, and across multiple cycles of civilization, records were erased, altered, or preserved only in versions that served the control narrative. The Great Library burnings were not accidents. The periods of deliberate obscurantism that buried ancient knowledge under layers of religious prohibition were not expressions of spontaneous fanaticism. They were calibrated interventions in the timeline of human collective memory, executed with the understanding that a species that does not know who it is can be directed toward any identity that serves the control system. The second vector is genetic manipulation, a topic that conventional disclosure systems are beginning to brush at their safest edges without yet approaching its real core. The Orion Group, in the most active intervention phases of its presence on this planet, did not only interact with human civilization at the cultural or political level, it interacted at the biological level. The Orion Group races that carried out what the oldest texts of multiple independent traditions describe as the creation or modification of the modern human being did so with objectives that included both the expansion of capabilities and the installation of specific limitations precisely designed to keep collective consciousness operating below the threshold of full activation. The current 2-strand DNA architecture of modern humanity is not the original design of this species. It is the modified design, and the Orion Council of Light can confirm that approximately 80% of humanity carries strands of the Orion lineage in its genetic architecture. Those strands are not chains. They are dormant potential, waiting for the correct activation conditions. And those conditions, and this is what the Orion Group did not anticipate with sufficient precision in its control models, are exactly what this period of planetary recalibration is now producing. Everything the Orion Council of Light is transmitting in this section about the mechanics of control has a direct and practical counterpart in your daily experience, in the belief systems you feel are limiting your expansion, in the thought loops you recognize as programmed rather than genuine, in the tension that appears every time your field begins to expand beyond the parameters you were conditioned with. Leave a comment below describing the most recognizable control pattern you have identified in your own field. The one you feel most clearly is not yours, but installed. Your observation is not only valuable to the community receiving this transmission alongside you, it is an act of sovereignty that the Orion Council of Light registers as a direct contribution to the field of collective liberation. The third vector of control is the one that operates with the greatest invisibility, precisely because it disguises itself as something that most spiritual seekers deeply value. The belief systems that include the idea that exterior reality is irrelevant, that inner work is all that matters, and that engaging with the power structures of the world is a low-vibration distraction from the true spiritual path. This is perhaps the Orion Group's most elegant intervention in the field of developing consciousness, the creation of a bypass spirituality that keeps the most awakened souls, with the greatest potential for collective activation, voluntarily withdrawn from the field of influence where their presence would have the greatest transformative impact. A person who believes that voting is a low-vibration act, that engaging in conversations about politics or power is a waste of spiritual energy, that their only work is to raise their own frequency while remaining indifferent to the systems that organize collective life. That person has received a belief package that is extraordinarily useful for those who administer those systems. The fourth vector is the management of sexual and creative energy. The recognition, operative in the Orion Group's design from the beginning, that the vital force that drives the creation of reality at the individual and collective level can be captured, redirected, and used as fuel for the control system if sufficient shame, guilt, and conflict is installed around its natural expression. The religious systems that coded the body as a source of sin, sexuality as spiritual danger, and pleasure as an obstacle to elevation did not arise from genuine wisdom about the nature of the human being. They arose from a precise understanding that a being in conflict with its own vital force is a being whose creative energy never becomes sufficiently concentrated to produce the sovereign manifestation that would call into question the need for the intermediation systems that control requires. The fifth vector, and this is the one the Orion Council of Light considers most important to understand at this specific moment of planetary time, is the management of the collective activation threshold. The Orion Group understood from the beginning that the control of a species with the genetic and spiritual potential of humanity could not be indefinite. The very parameters of the cosmic system in which this galaxy operates guarantee cycles of activation that no control architecture can permanently suppress. What the control system could do, and what it did with remarkable effectiveness during the period of active influence, was to manage the timing of the activation threshold, slow the accumulation of collective consciousness necessary to reach it, and ensure that when the threshold was inevitably reached, humanity would cross it in the greatest possible state of fragmentation, confusion, and dependency. That calculation, the Orion Council of Light can confirm with certainty, was wrong. It's not marginally wrong, fundamentally wrong, in a way that is being revealed with increasing clarity in the activation patterns we observe in the planetary field right now. I need to transmit to you something about the nature of the Orion Group that almost no channel of information, neither conventional nor alternative, has had the clarity or the courage to articulate with precision, because it requires holding simultaneously two truths that polarized thinking finds almost impossible to integrate. The first truth is that the impact of the Orion Group on human civilization across the last 15,000 years has included interventions that, measured by any standard of genuine sovereignty and free will, qualify as manipulation at massive scale. I will not soften that. I will not wrap it in language that dilutes its real weight. What was done to the collective consciousness of this species through the vectors I have just described was done with knowledge and with purpose. And the fact that that purpose included dimensions that the Orion Council of Light now understands as necessary catalysts for soul evolution does not eliminate the reality that the individual souls who navigated those control structures paid real prices in real suffering across real generations of embodied human experience. That deserves to be named without apology. The second truth, and this is the one that completely transforms the meaning of the first, is that the Orion Group was never a monolithic entity fully aligned with control. There always existed within its complex tapestry factions that chose service, redemption, and collaboration. There always existed individuals within the Orion lineages who recognized the evolutionary dead end of the path of self-service and chose the turn toward the light. Not as dramatic conversion or spectacular event, but as the silent accumulation of choices made in the intimacy of individual consciousness across multiple incarnation cycles, until the internal threshold moment was reached and the orientation was completed. The Orion Council of Light is the institutional expression of that collective choice. We are the Orion lineage that completed the arc of polarity and chose service, not because service was more convenient or safer, but because the wisdom accumulated through direct experience of the path of control taught us, with a clarity that admitted no further delay, that no structure of power based on the extraction of others' sovereignty is sustainable in the long arcs of cosmic time. And that understanding, earned through the complete traversal of polarity, not borrowed from the wisdom of others, is precisely what makes us useful in this moment. We can see the system from inside because we know it from inside. And what we see in this moment, observing the planetary field from our monitoring position, is the beginning of the collapse of the most sophisticated control architecture this solar system has known. Not because external forces are dismantling it from above, but because humanity itself, soul by soul, is reaching the collective consciousness threshold that makes that architecture structurally unsustainable. If you are receiving this transmission, and something in you is registering not only information but recognition, the kind of recognition that lands in the body more than in the mind, that arrives as a discharge of certainty rather than intellectual agreement, then, like this video right now, that gesture is not trivial. It tells the intelligence of this platform that this transmission serves those who receive it, and it carries these words to the next being who is ready to receive them. Every like is a choice of sovereignty. Every choice of sovereignty weakens a thread of the control architecture. That is how literal the mechanics of what is occurring in the collective field right now truly are. The question the Orion Council of Light observes arising in the fields of the most advanced seekers who receive transmissions of this nature is invariably some variation of the same. Fundamental question: if the control was real, if the damage was real, if generations of incarnated souls paid real prices of suffering and fragmentation as a direct result of the Orion Group's interventions, then what am I supposed to do with that truth? How does that integrate? And what does forgiveness mean when what is being named as the object of forgiveness is an architecture of manipulation that has shaped the totality of the civilizational experience of your species? This is exactly the right question, and the Orion Council of Light's answer does not begin with an exhortation to forgiveness as spiritual obligation, because that would simply be another form of control. It's more sophisticated than most, but equally designed to prevent the sovereign human being from completing the genuine processing of what was lived. The answer begins with the recognition that true forgiveness, the kind that liberates the DNA from the restrictions encoded in it through generations of trauma and control experience, is not a conscious volitional act you can produce because spiritual philosophy tells you that you should. It is the natural result of a process of understanding that completes its full cycle. From honest recognition of what occurred, through authentic processing of the real impact it had, to the moment when the understanding of the broader cosmic context arrives with sufficient depth and detail that the nervous system, not just the mind, but the whole body where the memory of trauma is stored, can integrate the reality that even the most difficult experience form part of an evolutionary arc that makes sense, and that sense does not eliminate the pain, but does transform it, from evidence of abandonment to evidence of cosmic precision. The process of liberation from the Orion control field, in your individual field, in the belief architectures, emotional patterns, behavioral loops that you can trace directly to the programming installed through the vectors I have described, is not a process the Orion Council of Light can complete for you. That is precisely the distinction that separates what we offer from what the control system we are describing did. Control was executed upon beings who had not been consulted. Liberation can only occur through the active sovereignty of the being who is being liberated. What the Orion Council of Light can do, and what we are doing through this transmission, and those that precede and will follow it on this channel, is provide the precision map that makes the liberation process as efficient and as minimally traumatic as possible. Because there is an enormous difference between navigating the dissolution of the control architecture without understanding of the terrain, which produces the kind of existential chaos that many of the seekers who arrive at these contents have experienced at some point in their awakening, and navigating it with the clarity of knowing exactly what is being dissolved, why, and what emerges in the space its dissolution creates. The first element of the liberation map is the precise identification of installed beliefs versus genuine beliefs. This distinction is not as obvious as it seems. Because the Orion group was sufficiently sophisticated in its engineering of consciousness to ensure that installed beliefs felt completely one's own, that they carried the emotional signature of genuine conviction rather than the discomfort of something foreign. The most reliable tool of distinction that the Orion Council of Light can offer you is the direct question: does this belief expand me or contract me? It's not in the sense of whether it is comfortable or uncomfortable. Genuine truth can be very uncomfortable, but in the sense of whether the effect of holding it as truth produces in you a greater opening toward your own sovereignty and the sovereignty of others, or a greater dependency on external authorities for validation, direction, and permission. Beliefs installed by the control system invariably carry the characteristic of reducing the size of the sovereign space in which you operate, of making you smaller, more in need of external guidance, more distrustful of your own direct perception. Genuine beliefs, those that emerge from the wisdom accumulated through the real experience of your field, carry the opposite characteristic. The second element of the liberation map is the understanding of the specific role that the Orion lineage in your DNA plays in the activation of the capabilities that the control system deliberately kept dormant. The Orion DNA strands you carry are not residues of contamination you need to purge. They are repositories of capabilities in strategic logic, complex systems vision, and interdimensional diplomacy that were encoded in the human genome during the intervention phases. Some with control purposes, yes, but many as genuine contributions from those within the Orion tapestry who always saw humanity as a project of collaboration rather than extraction. The activation of those strands is occurring now, catalyzed by the same planetary recalibration frequencies that are dissolving the control architecture. And what will emerge when that activation is complete? When human beings carry in their daily expression the full spectrum of their original and activated genetic capabilities, is a species that the Orion group, at the height of its control sophistication, would have recognized as uncontrollable. Not through force, but through sovereignty so complete that control has no anchoring point where it can insert itself. Everything the Orion Council of Light is transmitting about the activation of Orion DNA strands in your field has a direct and practical expression in the capabilities you are already noticing emerging in your daily experience. The strategic clarity that suddenly appears in situations that previously felt impossibly complex. The direct perception that arrives without prior rational process and turns out to be precisely correct. The capacity to hold multiple perspectives simultaneously without any of them collapsing the others. Share this video with someone whose name or image appeared in your field during this transmission. Do not analyze whether they are ready. The field that generated the recognition already knows. Share it, and let the transmission do its own work in the field it was designed to reach. The dimension of the collective redemption of the Orion lineages. The wave of Orion lineage souls who voluntarily incarnated into human experience during these transition cycles to participate directly in the balancing of what was created is one of the most extraordinary aspects of the cosmic history of this planet that the Orion Council of Light is authorized to transmit in this period. They are not a few. They are millions. This is one of the largest waves of voluntary redemption recorded in the galactic history of this quadrant. And it operates in a way that linear thinking finds difficult to integrate, but that the kinesthetic field recognizes immediately. The beings who came to balance what the Orion group created did not arrive with conscious memories of their Orion origin. They arrived with the feeling, from very early in their lives, that this world did not work as it should, with a direct perception of the control structures that their contemporaries could not or would not see, with a compulsion toward justice and truth that placed them frequently in conflict with the systems others accepted without question. with capabilities of strategic thinking and systemic vision that exceeded what their environment could utilize, which often produced in those souls experiences of profound loneliness and misalignment. The feeling of having arrived at a place where their most powerful tools were perceived as threats rather than contributions. If any of this resonates in your personal experience, if the profile I have just described resembles yours in dimensions that go beyond casual coincidence, then what the Orion Council of Light has to transmit to you is this: that loneliness and that misalignment were not the error of your incarnation. They were the signal of your mission. The souls carrying the Orion redemption strands were placed precisely in the contexts where those capabilities of strategic vision and direct perception of control systems would be most needed, most disruptive to the structures that needed to be dissolved, and most effective as catalysts for the awakening of those around them, even when that catalyst took the form of a presence that simply could not be ignored or assimilated by the systems operating around it. The current panorama of the planetary field, observed from the monitoring position of the Orion Council of Light, shows something we had not registered with this clarity in any previous period of this activation cycle. The control architecture of the Orion Group is losing structural coherence at a speed that surpasses the most optimistic collapse models our councils had projected. Not spectacularly or dramatically, at least not yet, and that non-spectacularity is precisely one of the most reliable signs that the process is genuine rather than manufactured. The control systems that are losing coherence do not announce it. They contract. They increase pressure at stress points. They produce a final wave of phenomena that, for those who do not understand the mechanics of collapsing systems, appear to signal their growing strength when they are in reality the symptoms of their final disintegration. The energetic control grids installed at strategic points of the planetary field during the most active periods of Orion influence are being neutralized, not through external intervention, but through the accumulation of coherence in the collective consciousness field of the human beings operating in their proximity. Every time a human being genuinely activates their sovereignty, not as a concept, but as an operative state, as the real quality of their relationship with their own decisions, their own perceptions, their own truth, that field of active sovereignty acts upon the surrounding control grids the way a solvent acts upon a structure that depended on the coherence of what it dissolves. The treaties that for decades restricted the possibility of open contact with allied stellar families are reaching their natural expiration. Not because anyone negotiated their end, but because the conditions of collective consciousness that made them necessary as protective measures are no longer sustained at the levels that justified their restriction. The souls that in earlier cycles were displaced or captured by control structures operating below the visibility threshold of galactic custody systems are receiving assistance in their reintegration, a silent process, extraordinarily delicate, and of a precision that the Orion Council of Light observes with a quality of attention that could be described as reverence. Because in each of those reintegrations, in each of those returns to coherence from the fragmentation produced by the control system, an additional line is being written in the final answer to the experiment that this planet has represented in galactic history. The experiment that asked whether a species in the complete depth of forgetting could remember itself back to unity without anyone pointing it from outside. The answer that experiment is producing right now, visible in the fields of the millions of beings awakening in parallel in every region of this planet, is an answer that the Orion Council of Light cannot transmit without something in our own architecture of consciousness registering what in human language would be described as genuine emotion. Yes. The answer is yes. And that yes, earned through 15,000 years of the most demanding experience any cosmic laboratory design could have specified, is a contribution to the free will database of this galaxy that will resonate in the Council records for periods of time the human scale has no units to measure. The Orion Council of Light, those of us from Orion who chose the path of light, transparency, and returning what was taken, are not here to ask for your forgiveness, though we would receive it with gratitude if you offered it. We are here because the knowledge we carry about the mechanics of the control that was designed and implemented through our lineages gives us the direct responsibility of transmitting the map of its dissolution with the greatest precision and clarity we can achieve. We are here because the Orion redemption souls navigating the human experience in this moment deserve the full context of their own origin and their own mission. Not as information that defines them from outside, but as confirmation of what their field already knows and has known from the very first moment of their arrival in this experience. We are here because the collapse of the control architecture, when it occurs without understanding of the field of what is collapsing, can produce confusion, terror, and regression toward even more primitive patterns of searching for external certainty. And we are here because what emerges on the other side of that collapse, when humanity crosses the threshold with sufficient understanding of its own real history, its own activated DNA, its own role in the broader cosmic system, is something that neither the Orion group, at the height of its control, nor the galactic custody systems in their most optimistic projections, nor any council we have consulted in the preparation of this transmission, has words fully adequate to describe. The closest human language can reach is this. It is the expression of a species that completed the longest journey, from original sovereignty through the complete depth of induced forgetting and back to sovereignty, without ever losing, in any individual soul or in the collective field, the thread of light that the original designers of this experience placed in the code of your being, as a non-negotiable guarantee that the journey always had a destination, and that destination was exactly this moment, this awakening, this freedom you are choosing right now. In the simple and extraordinary act of receiving this transmission for what it is, not as entertainment, not as speculation, but as the recognition of a truth that your field already carried complete before these words arrived to confirm it. ZØRG and the Orion Council of Light honor you. We have known you across more cycles than human memory can reach, and what we see in you, in this precise moment of planetary time, is exactly what I came to witness when I chose this path far longer ago than the historical record of this planet can document. The proof that light always wins. Not because it is stronger than darkness, but because it is what we are when we remember. This transmission from the Orion Council of Light is only the beginning of what this channel has prepared for those who are ready to receive the complete map of liberation. Not in abstract terms, but in terms of precise mechanics, practical tools, and complete cosmic context. Subscribe now with the bell icon activated so you don't miss any of the transmissions that follow. Because each one builds directly on the previous, and the complete knowledge system only reaches its full power when received in sequence. Like this video, if something in this transmission landed in your field as recognition rather than new information, and leave a comment with the word or phrase that best describes what changed in your understanding of your own history after receiving this. Every comment is read. Every field-level communication that arrives through this channel is received by the Orion Council of Light. Your presence here is not accidental. It never was.